Hey gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 3 July 2013, the eve of Independence Day. I thought this would be a good night for a good old-fashioned knife review, so congratulations or condolences. You have stumbled into what could be a long and complicated discussion of a knife I think is pretty darn cool. It is the Lionsteel SR-1A. I'm going to get started right away and take you into some background of this knife as best I could research and understand it. For most of us Americans of limited mental capacity, it's kind of a murky picture. Here's what I know. And if what I know is wrong and somebody knows different and has better information during the course of this review, please weigh in the comments, because I would love to hear it. Here's the best understanding I can give you of how this knife came to be. Who did it? Where they're from. Of course, the manufacturer is Lionsteel. And I guess not unlike American knife companies over the last couple hundred years, knife companies in Europe and Italy also seem to come and go and morph from one name into another, and guys have associations and they change them. And but best I can tell, Lionsteel is a family-owned cutlery company founded in the 60s by the Paoletta family, currently operated by Gianni Paoletta, a great knife designer in his own right. Not only do they produce their own brand of Lionsteel knives, they also have worked with RYP on the DPX Hest series of knives. They have been a contract manufacturer for other people's designs over the last decade or so. Now this series of knives, the SR-1 series, are not designed by Gianni. They are designed by a gentleman, and I believe this is a guy, not an Italian design firm, quote unquote. Mr. Moletta, can't find his first name, also has done some collaboration work with Nexus knives, and primarily in fixed blades. And the shape of this folding knife blade is pretty consistent with the images of his work I've seen in fixed blades. And we'll get into this blade shape as the review goes on, because it's pretty cool after I've worked on it a little bit. Got some things to say about it. The SR-1, which is the original and titanium handled version of this knife, been around since 2010, and at Blade 2010 it won an award for Most Innovative Imported Design. Now, this knife comes actually in three basic forms, not counting blade coatings or lack thereof or handle colors. The three forms are the original Lionsteel SR-1, this version, the SR-1A, and then the Spyderco collaboration called the Lion Spy. And let's walk through what the differences and similarities are. All three knives have this same basic profile, the same basic shape, the same or similar fluting on the handle, same or similar pocket clip, same or similar pivot, lockbar insert, and Rotoblock, over travel stabilizer and locker, we'll call it. That's where the similarities sort of end, and now let's get into what's different. Of course, the original SR-1 is a titanium handle. This one, the SR-1A, a 7000 series or ergal aluminum, which is a super strong aircraft quality aluminum alloy. And then both of those, the SR1 and SR1A, are what Lionsteel refers to as monoblock construction, meaning whether aluminum or titanium, the handles are milled and machined from a solid block of material. You notice there is no seam, there are no fasteners holding the knife together. A pretty ambitious little machining project, don't you think? Now the Lionspy differs, and the way it differs presents some problems with that particular version that we'll get into as the review rolls on. The Lionspy is a more traditional titanium frame lock in that the left side of the knife, or the lock side, is machined from titanium, looks a lot like this, except it's titanium. The offside, non-locking side of the knife is G10, and then those two halves are joined together with rather standard fasteners. Now there's no backspacer or standoffs in that knife. It sort of emulates the monoblock construction. The G10 side folds over, the titanium side comes over the back strap, the G10 side comes over the back strap, and they supposedly meet seamlessly down the spine of the knife, but they don't, usually. Steels are also different in all three knives. The SR1 uses a Sleipner steel, that is a Swedish steel, and it is, I guess, best described as D2 improved. Let me wipe my fingerprints off. The SR-1A blade is crafted from German D2 steel. And then in the Lionspy you have LMAX, which is a powdered metal technology stainless steel. Supposed to be a really good steel. I don't often see it executed well in production knives, as it is very hard to grind, and I see a lot of burned edges, which result in underperforming knives with poor edge retention. Let's see. Also, a design difference between the two Lionsteel branded versions and the Spyderco is deployment method. Of course, the Spyderco version has a round thumb hole, and the two Lionsteel knives are deployed by thumb stud. Okay, let's talk about why, with those three choices, I chose this one. First of all, well, since it's a knife, let's talk about why I chose this blade steel. As some of you know who pay attention to my channel, I adore D2. And I heard such wonderful things about this German version of that steel, I just had to have it. Didn't see any reason to spend basically $200 more than I paid for this knife to get the Sleipner version. I did a little bit of looking at the chemistry of the D2 versus the Sleipner. The D2 has higher carbon and higher chromium contents. The trace elements in the Sleipner steel are different, more vanadium, more molybdenum, and they have their reasons for that, I'm sure, but I wanted D2. Especially at the price point. I just can't believe the Sleipner was that much better a steel with less carbon and less chromium to make it worth the price. Especially since I'm not in love with titanium. Which brings me to the second reason I chose this knife. Because it is less expensive and because of the 7000 series aluminum used in it, I really wanted to see what was up. my experience, and I'm going to fly in the face with groupthink and conventional frame lock wisdom by saying I think titanium makes a really poor spring. And of course, the locking mechanism on this knife is a very long leaf spring. This is just my 2 cents, guys. As a great YouTuber once said, your mileage may vary. In my opinion, titanium locking liner or locking frame slab leaf springs have a very limited range of motion. If you take them apart and watch how they work, very, very often you will see a lock bar that when the blade is out of the knife, the lock bar travels barely past where it rests when it engages the tang. It's basically out of juice when it stops against the blade tang. And a lot of times you'll find that the effort required to disengage it once you get past the stickiness of titanium is very low. And then you'll find that the spring tension stacks a great deal as you try to clear the blade tang with it. So very limited range and not very linear spring tension. Just my opinion. Actually, it's just my experience. It's not necessarily an opinion. I'm sure that some titanium frame locks are designed better than others. I mean, there are other variables besides material here. You've got the effective length of the lock bar from here to there. You've got thickness of the lock bar, thickness of the relief cut. I just don't think it makes a great spring in my estimation. I think stainless steel makes a lot better frame lock as far as the operation of the lock itself than does titanium, and I really was interested because I know a little bit about aluminum. I was interested to see how well the 7000 series aluminum does, and frankly it behaves almost exactly like stainless steel. So that is a very good thing. Now let's talk about why this over the Lionspy, and that might surprise some of you because guys who watch my videos know I am a Spyderco nut. But one of the most innovative and attractive design features of this knife is the monoblock construction. You can't get more rigid than one piece. There is no variability in fit. You take the knife apart to clean it and lube it, fluff it and buff it, whatever you want to do. When you go back together, everything's in the same place because the handle didn't come apart. And I've noticed on many a video of the Lionspy, there are definite fit and finish issues between the two halves. So a construction difference I didn't like the Spyderco for. A blade steel issue that I, believe it or not, I prefer D2 over LMAX. Perhaps the polish on that edge might give you a clue as to why. The other thing, I love the spider hole, except in this profile, does that knife need to be any broader in your pocket? I think not. I love the spider hole deployment, and I really would have liked to have no thumb stud for sharpening on the Edge Pro Apex. Can't really use the flat. It's too narrow. I have to actually use the main bevel of the knife, which requires a little math as you're setting up the machine. But even though I love the spider hole and I wanted that large flat caused by having it there, the combination of other factors and the fact that it would have been an even broader knife in the pocket was sort of the last reason I opted for this knife. Now let's get into some specifics. First, let's go over some dimensions. Overall length of the knife, tip to tail. 8.3 inches. Blade length, 3.7 inches. Handle length, 4.6 inches. Thickness of this blade stock is 0.177 inches, almost 3/16 of an inch. Thickness of the handle at its widest point, 0.58 inches, and an overall weight of this massively broad, massively thick, 3 3/4 inch bladed folding knife, 5.6 ounces. That, guys, is very, very lightweight for this chunk of steel in a folding knife. And now you think, okay, we got a big heavy blade and we make up all the weight in this lightweight aluminum handle, but you would think that really throws off the balance of the knife, wouldn't you? But look what we have here. Perfect center of finger choil balance in 5.6 ounces. Pretty cool. For the record, both other versions outweigh this knife by just a bit. Now, I mentioned this Moletta blade shape. It is kind of familiar and kind of different, isn't it? When I first looked at it, I thought, it's kind of a stubby Randall or Essie profile blade, sort of a big old broad drop point. And it is that. Nicely curved spine, I don't know, or crowned, I guess you would call it. There's something kind of cool about it, though. It is a flat ground blade from more than 3/4 to the spine. But I want to see if you can pick up how the light reflects off this thing. Okay, that kind of shows you. This flat grind proceeds from the end of the plunge grind to where this little radius starts. And if you notice, the radius of this flat corresponds exactly to the radius of the belly of the blade. That grind is flat not only top to bottom, but back to front until you get to right here. And then it's almost like you have to look at it like a pie. Let's see if I can do this for you. Then that grind proceeds like this. It's a curved flat grind, so it's flat from top to bottom, but it follows a thickness curve this way, like an arc that corresponds to this belly. I'm not explaining that very well, but if you look at my secondary bevel, or my approach grind to the edge, you'd expect a big chunk of steel like this in a drop point with a consistent angle approach grind. You'd expect that grind to get way thicker as it comes to the tip, or way broader as it comes to the tip, because the knife is thicker. Usually you're going to see a top to bottom taper, but not much distal taper, and certainly not this abrupt transition that you have in these Lionsteels. It's so cool. The thickness behind the edge back here is the same as it is here, here, and here. See how that edge grind, or that approach grind, is the same width all the way down the blade? I didn't really know it till I started sharpening it, and it's pretty cool. It gives you like really uniform, consistent slicing ability in any area of the knife. It looks kind of neat. It definitely catches the eye. As you run your finger down, it almost feels like there's a hump right here, but there's not. You have the same thickness all the way through, and then you feel an abrupt radius right here and a whole new profile. Really cool and darn good looking. And look at the finishing. Look past my fingerprints and look at the finishing on that beautiful, beautiful D2 blade. I already mentioned the crown spine. The satin finish is just gorgeous. The laser etching is really cool. It's not just one line. I don't know that you can really see it on camera, but the letters are actually outlined. And the Lionsteel logo kind of fades from white to black. It's so cool. The thumb stud, it needs a good one, and it has one. Nicely terraced, no round crown, and you need good purchase because there's not much good purchase anywhere else on the knife, and we'll get to that. Let's get back to the pivot here. We have a large exposed or visible piece of hardware on this pivot, but it's not overly large. It's a pretty standard diameter pivot. Just a male-female setup, and although there is a proprietary tool included in the box that uses two of these 4 holes, a regular old T10 works just fine. Washers on this knife, don't know if you can see them. This is one thing that made me almost not buy it. They are not phosphor bronze, they are Teflon, and I believe you can see them there. They're not my preferred choice for a knife pivot washer, but they seem to work okay. Emerson uses something called Nylatron. It's sort of a hard gray nylon kind of a washer. Hinderer for years used Teflon washers. I don't know if some of their knives now have gone to ball bearings, but my experience is that not necessarily blade play, but side to side rigidity is usually not as good with Teflon as it is with phosphor bronze washers. And sometimes, although they're smooth, they sort of have an inertia effect, like they're hard to get started moving. Once they are once the blade is moving, it does so smoothly. But having said that, now, guys, I have a very rigid knife, and I have no play. And when I release this lock bar, let's look what happens. Blade drops free. So I'm going to eat my words. Teflon works just fine. Now, why does aluminum work for a frame lock? Well, because of this. Hardened stainless steel lock bar insert. Hardened stainless on hardened stainless. That lets us have a situation where we can use a very shallow angle on the blade tang because wear is going to be minimal. This knife came to me at about 40% lockup, and it's still at about 40% lockup. I would expect it to move maybe to 50 in its lifetime. I don't expect to ever have any lock rock. I don't expect to have any lock slip. And I expect it to last a long time. If I ever do get somewhere, I guess maybe I could write them and ask them to send me a new lock bar insert, which I could remove and replace. Let's go to the back of the knife. Stop pin. Again, like the pivot, not overly large. Now it is, I wouldn't call it shouldered, but it is a solid piece of stainless steel that goes through the non-locking side and then protrudes into, at that full diameter, protrudes into the locking side of the aluminum, which is then countersunk to accept the screw that holds it in. You're not depending on the threaded diameter of the screw for strength. You're depending on that full machine stainless steel diameter. I would say it's plenty. Not overbuilt, but not at all inadequate. There's a good shot of the inside. Jimping is short, a very short run, but perfect. It's not deep, it's not going to draw blood, but your thumb is not moving on that jimping. No issues with that whatsoever. Now let's move down to this Rotoblock. It works very well as an over travel stop for the Lockbar. I guarantee you don't want to over travel this aluminum. It gets to a point in its tensile strength range where it just likes to snap. So we don't want to push it past its yield point at all. The way this Rotoblock is designed to work is that we can rotate it once the knife is open in a clockwise direction, and the Lockbar now cannot be disengaged. I will not tell you that it turns the knife into a virtual fixed blade. It's not a fixed blade. What it is a frame lock knife with the lock unable to be disengaged in any normal way. It's not as strong as a fixed blade, but it will eliminate any chance of accidental disengagement. I will probably never use it, but it's there if you like it. You can, if you so desire, rotate it to the fully counterclockwise position, and then this center concentric circle portion of this disc is the fastener. You can back it off and crank it down and it'll never move. Handle is hard anodized black in mine. It does come in other colors. I'm sure you've all seen them. We'll not spend any time on that. Got a lanyard hold, nice size. You could get ungutted paracord through that if you were patient enough. Let's talk about the pocket clip. Pretty cool. The fastener for the pocket clip is hardened, and it is a glass breaker. This brings me to another reason I didn't buy the Lionspy. On the Lionspy, if you notice, that pocket clip fastener goes dead center down the handle. So what does that mean if you put the clip on the Lionspy? Well, it means half the threads are in titanium and half the threads are in G10. I don't trust it. I love G10 for its stiffness and its strength to weight ratio. I just don't know how it takes threads. And if I took my pocket clip on and off very many times, I really have to wonder if I'd have any threads left. It is reversible left to right, another reason I bought this knife. It is very short, means it doesn't get in the way, and as I grip the knife, I can't feel it. It's very well done. Now, if you use the pocket clip as an anchor for opening, it's pretty sharp, not very well rounded. Now, you sort of learn after a while how to open this knife without causing yourself any pain on the pocket clip. But I'll be honest with you, it deploys quickly, but it takes some practice. The clip is extremely stiff. For that reason, they have perfectly, let's see if you can see this. If you notice, it does not touch the aluminum. I think that's so cool. It's so stiff that even with fairly thin pants, it holds adequately. But it'll never scratch that aluminum. Isn't that cool? I thought it was. Let's see. Let's talk about some general impressions now. Okay, now unlike most larger, beefier frame lock knives, I don't believe Lionsteel markets this as a hard use tactical. Well, because let's face it, the knives it competes against, titanium frame locks, no matter what their manufacturers say, they are not hard use knives. Titanium is a very fragile material. You know, spend hours if you'd like watching YouTube videos about lockup issues with titanium frame locks. That emperor has no clothes, my friends. if you're going to make a frame lock knife out of titanium, you better have some steel in the lock or you're going to have problems. Simple as that. Hands down, bar none. Even though this knife does have some design and engineering features that make it stronger than your average titanium frame lock, you know, it's got a fairly small pivot, got a fairly small stop pin, and let's face it, guys, it's really too pretty to be thumping on. Not saying I'm not going to use it for cutting, or not that I won't carry it, because oh, I will cut with it, and oh, I will carry it. But we're not going to be chopping down any trees or batoning firewood with this like I did with my Recon 1. That's just not going to happen. What it is an extremely good cutter. Even with that almost 3/16 of an inch stock, so broad and such a gradual flat grind down to the edge. Not super thin behind the edge, as you can tell by the width of my 15-degree secondary bevel. It's probably 25 thousandths behind the edge. Thick enough to have support for that nice hard D2, and thin enough to slice well. Let's talk about the action of this knife. As you saw, it is very, very slippery. Although you have great purchase when the knife is open, getting it open takes some practice and some muscle memory. For me, it's got to be out in my fingertips. I've got to be applying some pressure with these 3 fingers on this edge of the frame. And it's almost I'm almost pushing straight down or straight in toward the middle on the thumb stud as I break that detent and open it up. Pressing down, pressing the frame into these 3 fingers so I can grab that ridge, because it's slippery. Now if I'm going for a rapid deployment, again it's sort of a look at the angle of my thumb, almost pushing directly in on that thumb stud. But it flies right out. I mean, it just takes some technique. Once it's open though, I mean, it fits the hand like nothing else. And it doesn't care what grip. It just, I mean, it's really, really great in the hand. There's just not a grip it doesn't like. And as slippery as the handle is, it fits so well, and your hand is restrained so well by the shape of the handle. You're not going to slip. How about that thing for a slasher, huh? Wow. I mean, you could be a pretty dangerous, well-dressed man carrying this thing around. No doubt about that. The last thing I want to talk about is the sweet noises this knife makes. Well, first of all, just watch how smooth. I'm just going to... It's just smooth. And watch this. Sort of... I was pressing in on the lock bar there. Hold on. So sweet. And listen to the noises. I'm going to open it slow, full range. Now this is kind of cool. I'm going to like grab the blade and try not to put any pressure on the handle. Listen to this sound. It like rings. It's so cool. And then of course if you really snap it open, even closing sounds cool. It's you know, it's kind of like a Ferrari, isn't it? You know, old Ferraris have these notoriously balky gear cases, and they're not easy to shift. Kind of like opening this knife, you got to really practice and figure out what kind of motion it wants, what kind of tangent you're applying pressure to. And it took me a couple days to really get good at it. But man, once I learned, ooh, it's just so much fun to play with. And what a high performance machine it is, huh? And I gotta tell you guys, the fit and finish on this knife are so good. Unlike the many reports you'll see about the Lionspy, this monoblock construction is what this knife was meant to be. When they tried to turn it into something else for Spyderco, things went haywire. You could get a good one or you could get a bad one. But this is one of those things, if you're going to spend close to $200 for a knife or $400 for the regular SR-1, don't you really want it in the form that was in the mind's eye of the designer when it was created? I do. I mean, collaborations are cool sometimes, but this knife was really meant to be this knife, not a Spyderco. Hate to say that, but this knife is not a Spyderco. Haven't used this very much. I've had it less than a week, but I just want to tell you, it is a beautiful and functional piece of knife art. Essentially, the proceeds of the sale of my ZTO 550 paid for this. I paid almost exactly the same money for the two knives. I really don't want to tell you what I paid for this because it was less than you'll probably find one for. And frankly, this is twice the knife of the ZTO 550. Yeah, I know, it's an aluminum handled knife. It's twice the knife of the ZTO 550. Aluminum handle, Teflon washers. It's hard to believe. It was hard for me to believe. But it's really cool. I will keep you posted as I carry this and use it. But as for right now, outstanding. That's all for tonight, guys. Grace and peace. And remember, the word is